Welcome to Play by Players, an MLSPA podcast. Now here's your host, former MLS player, Bobby Boswell.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in. We're joined today by a guy that recently retired. I think I say I recently retired, but I don't think anyone has retired as recently as this guy. He's played close to or over 175 professional games, probably even more than that with all the competitions he played in. He's an MLS Cup champion. Way to go out on top. He's a College Cup champion. Went out on top there as well. But please welcome to the podcast, Harry Shipp.
How's it going? Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for joining us. Where are you at these days? I know you just retired, but where are you at?
Yeah, we actually retired last, I think, Tuesday, so just over a week ago now. We packed up all our stuff and then drove 35 hours from Seattle to Louisville, Kentucky, where my wife's from this weekend. So I've just been kind of hanging out, enjoying the first couple of days of retirement by the pool, which has been nice.
That is a good way. I retired and went right to work, but I think you're doing it right. So, yeah. Well, you are a soft-spoken guy. I got to know you over the years through the MLSPA stuff, so I appreciate you being in front of the camera today. Crazy times we're in, and I'll get into the retirement. I kind of want to end on that, but I always like to throw it back to the beginning. But before we do that, I very rarely reach out to people when I'm doing my homework for these former players, and I happen to know a lot of guys you played with because you were on some pretty cool teams. You had some cool teammates and some I say not cool teammates, the guys I didn't like playing against. But and it was a reoccurring theme here. And it was first thing, and I don't want to get you beat up when you're walking around the streets, but they told me, multiple people told me to ask you how much money you have in your wallet right now.
I actually swear to God, I don't carry a wallet anymore. So
okay.
I got guys used to give me such a hard time my first couple of years in the league. That now I literally just have a phone case with a credit card and ID, and that's all I carry.
Okay, so you're not strapped with cash like
no,
you used to be.
I went from, and it wasn't even cash. It was just random cards that I had accumulated over the years. I just kept all in one place so I didn't lose them. And I completely ditched that, and I've gone the extreme opposite. And now I just literally carry credit card and ID, and that's it.
All right. Well, I mean, it is when more and more people say that, it's like, what is the story behind this?
Who said that?
Don't worry. I don't disclose my sources. I know.
It was 100% Chicago because I haven't done that in 5 years probably.
Okay. Well, I realize I know a lot of guys you went to college with, and that's where that's where we'll start with this. You're a Notre Dame guy.
Yeah.
Tell us about, I know you have a big family. You're the oldest of four. I'm the youngest of four, and I probably have more in common with your younger sister than you. But tell me about what was you're a successful guy all through your whole career up until until you really joined Chicago. But tell me about the decision to go to Notre Dame. It seems like it's a bit of a legacy thing for you with your family.
Yeah, so I grew up in Chicago, and my mom had gone there, and her whole family had gone there. So I kind of grew up drinking that Kool-Aid, where we would go to football games every fall, at least once a year. So I think I grew up in the environment where I just idolized Notre Dame and was wow, this would be such a cool place to go. And then when I actually started looking at schools when I was in maybe a sophomore year of high school, they had a really good soccer team. I knew I wanted to go somewhere that was really good at soccer and it was good academically. And that was there was a couple places that I was thinking about, but that was probably the best combination of the two. And it was a place I really felt if I wanted to become a professional player, which I thought at that time I did, it was going to be a place that would allow me to do that. And then also I knew I didn't want to stay in soccer forever. So it was going to be a place that would give me something that I could fall back on, if and when soccer wasn't my life.
Okay. Well, I know you had a couple of big accomplishments there. You're one of the three captains of the team, and y'all won a national championship, the first national championship, I think ever, right, for the program.
Yeah, as far as I know.
And I think your coach there, who I actually knew from, I think, Stanford, was Bobby Clark, a big name in college soccer. And I think he called you was it the Wizard or the Wandering Wizard? What were these college nicknames you had?
Wizard, I don't even remember. Something with Wizard in it. It was God, I cannot remember now. But
Well,
yeah,
I saw an article. I saw a ridiculous article,
yeah, it was something like that, and I can't
it was a
remember.
ridiculously well-written article, but it was about how your life should be made into a movie. You know, and it was
I've tried to block those things out of my brain.
traditional Notre Dame. You know, there's a reason everyone there's a reason a lot of people dislike Notre Dame,
Yeah.
but for good reason. But you know, it had a little bit of a Rudy reference in there. Did you ever see yourself as like the soccer version of Rudy?
No, I I did like the movie Rudy when I was growing up, partly because I just, like I said, loved everything about Notre Dame. But no, like I had no desire to be that kind of character.
Yeah, I think you were much more talented coming in, especially.
Yeah.
Well, you know, you had a couple of big accomplishments. I referred to that earlier. You know, being the captain of a team that won the national championship. You were a Herman Trophy finalist. I think Patrick Mullins won it the year that you were there.
Yeah, he did that year.
But I think the bigger one, which I think is pretty impressive to a lot of other people, was your academic. You were, I think it was an academic All-American, you're one of the few in the history of Notre Dame to do that.
Yeah, I think I was also like scholar. I forget, it was like the top scholar, I think, of all of Division I men's soccer for that year.
Yeah, so that one's actually probably much more impressive.
Yeah, I mean, that was something my parents were most proud about.
Yeah, well, that is pretty impressive, and I think that'll, you know, we'll keep coming back to this.
Yeah.
This. You know, you kind of hinted at it. You know, you always wanted to do more. You know, and in my research for this interview, I noticed that theme where you always placed a big emphasis on your ability to think. You know, which goes back to maybe the label you got when you came, you know, at every level, right? Is this guy that's a little underwhelming on his size, but his ability with his feet and his ability to think is pretty impressive. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, I was just someone, like, even growing up, like, I was always the small. Like, I think my sophomore year of high school I was only like 5 foot. So like for me, I was just, and I grew a little bit late, but I was always someone that was super undersized. I could move and was quick, but was never fast. Like straight ahead's being the same thing in the league. So I think over time I was just someone who was forced to think through a game, and like the only thing I really had going for me was like knowing, one, thinking a couple steps ahead of everyone else where the ball was going to end up, and then also like knowing what I was going to do with it before I got it. And like even in high school and college where you didn't really have to do that, I was already trying to do that, which, you know, gave me some confidence that like even if you surrounded me with guys that were better technically and faster and bigger, like I could still figure out a way to make it work.
Okay.
And that was, it was just something I kind of dealt with my whole life.
All right. Well, tell me about, I think I saw something about were you one of the first products of the Academy? Is that the Chicago Fire Academy?
Yeah, it was. And it's kind of funny. Like when I was 16, so I was a sophomore in high school, the whole academy system started. Like before that, there was nothing. So I was playing for a club in Chicago near my house. And then I moved and started playing for a club called the Chicago Magic, which was pretty famous.
Yep.
So like a lot of the best players in Chicago were playing for that Magic team. And even though the Fire Academy started that year, like not a lot of the best players were playing for it because it was literally the first year the academy started. And then after like a year and a half of playing with the Magic, our coach left and went to the Fire. So literally our whole team left and went to the Fire. So like it was kind of one of those things where there wasn't any guys who were playing for academies and signing professionally. So I didn't really have these people to like look up to in that process. It was kind of just by happenstance that I ended up in the Fire's academy. But obviously was super fortunate that because of that, I was able to sign out of Notre Dame there. And that was something like I really wanted to do. And I was happy that it worked out the way it did.
Okay. I don't know from afar, because I just remember this from when it actually happened. You were kind of one of those, I call them one of the first controversy players, meaning I think there was a lot of questions. I think some stuff happened with some Seattle players, but there was some questions of the criteria, because I think a lot of teams wanted to draft you. Do you remember that at all?
Yeah, because I played literally like 1 year, and then I went to college, and then I played a little bit of PDL my first summer, but I didn't really want to do that. Like you can basically accumulate service time by either playing in the academy or back then, I don't know if it's changed, was like playing with PDL in the summers. And then my second 2 summers, I didn't want to play PDL. I told them like, I'll train with the first team and like, that's great for me, but I don't really want to do that and travel around with the PDL. So I trained a bunch with the first team those summers, but like those didn't officially count as time served with the club, which is super weird. So when I was coming out, they really only counted like 1 year and 1 summer of being in as part of the Fire.
Okay.
So yeah, like I just remember originally I think the league ruled that I wasn't going to be a homegrown, and then I have no idea why they changed it, but they ended up changing it. But it was one of those situations where like I was happy with it, so I wasn't going to fight their decision.
Yeah, you wanted to be, that's your hometown.
Yeah, it would have been cool. And I grew up like literally when they started, I was like 7 or 8, their first year in the league. And I remember going to games at Soldier Field. And then when they moved out to Toyota Park, I still went to a bunch of games. So it was like one of those things where I grew up watching the club. So I was super excited to have the opportunity to play for them.
Who'd you watch? Was it my guy, Peter Novak? When you
Peter
watched
Novak, yeah.
do you like him or no?
I did, yeah. It was Peter Novak, like Stoichkov was on the teams, Klopas, like Lubos Kubik, like Dima Kovalenko. Okay. Those teams were pretty good.
Yeah, I played for one of those guys, and I played with one of those guys, so it
Nice.
Gives you a little idea. So let's talk about, you come in your first year, you've just won a national championship, you're feeling like you're on top of the world. Talk to me about this first year with Chicago.
Yeah, because it was one of those things like you said, like my first couple years in college, like I always knew I could play, but I didn't really have the stats or anything. So like I wasn't really getting national attention, I guess. And then my second couple years, I actually started scoring a bunch of goals and having assists, and like we won a national championship. So I think I never really was like consciously doubting. Like I never had one doubt for a second that I could be successful that first year. And I remember our first game, we were playing at Chivas, and I didn't dress. I wasn't in the 18. I remember being like, God, this sucks. Like, I hate this. So then we lost to Chivas away, and then our second game was at Portland, and I went from like not dressing, and they basically just like completely decided to change the entire lineup because we played so bad that first game, that I actually ended up starting that second game and did all right. And then like kind of the rest of the year, I don't remember like off the top of my head how many games I started, but I think I played in every single game, the last 33. So I think for me, it was just one of those things where I was able to kind of build on that confidence of staying in college 4 years, because even back then, and especially now, like that's not super common. But I do think for me, from like a confidence point of view, staying those extra couple years, like was super important to making me believe that I actually could contribute at that next level.
Okay. And then do you remember anyone that made it hard on you or easy on you? Who'd you look up to or avoid, that first year?
The first year, I mean, it's tough. Like we had some guys like, I mean, I always looked up to Jeff Ronowitz. Like he was someone, and I had Logan Paz around then. So like we had some really good locker room guys. And then like Mike McGee, like he was just someone that I admired from a playing point of view, because he was kind of similar physically to me. Like he didn't really have anything special about him, but just was a super smart player. And so being able to see guys like that in practice every day, I think, again, gave me confidence. Like, all right, I can make it work if I have this right attitude where it's like I come into work and just worry about myself and worry about getting better every single day. But it is so funny looking back, like, yeah, I think that first year especially, I was kind of just in like absorb everything from everyone. And I was pretty quiet, I would say, those first couple years, partly because I was like, I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just in this environment where it was very, very different from college. And it was hard too, like our teams weren't very good. So like, it was one of those things. It was like a huge wake up call from like being in college where we expected to win every game, and then going to a situation where like, if we won a game, it was this huge accomplishment.
Yeah. Well, I think your first year, y'all set a record for ties.
Yeah, we did. We tied. I think it was like 18 or 19 games.
Yeah, I think more than that. I think it was closer to 20 or something. But I think y'all only won like 6 games, which is pretty tough. Yeah. I guess it's not like you lost every game, but then again, tying everyone it's got to be.
Yeah, and I think especially like tying at home, and we tied a lot of games at home, I remember, and that like gets kind of deflating because you kind of are hoping to collect points at home, obviously.
Yeah. Well, you had a pretty good year, though. I mean, you were I think you finished second in the second in the Rookie of the Year voting, right? You had
actually my most goals in my career was in my first year, so it was all downhill. It was all downhill from there.
Yeah, well, I think you ended pretty strong.
Yeah.
But Tesho Akindele got that one in Dallas. I know you beat my guy Birnbaum in DC. He felt like if he had a full year, he would have won, but
he probably would have, to be honest.
Yeah, but that didn't happen. So you go into the second year, and you kind of hinted at it earlier. Y'all were you're the worst team in the MLS from a standings standpoint. And, I know you penned an emotional letter to the fans when it was time for you to leave, but walk me through getting traded and how you found out and what you were thinking.
Yeah, it's tough. Halfway through that second year, we had Frank Yalb as our coach, and he had gotten fired. So it was like it's just weird. Like, it was my first experience with that because I had so much continuity in my life in terms of like who the coaching staff was, and then to like walk in one day, and we kind of knew it might be coming, but to kind of walk in one day and just have that happen was a weird first experience. So at the end of that year, like you said, we were pretty terrible, and then I started that third. Like, we had meetings, like some of the new people who were coming in. We had meetings, and we knew that there was going to be a huge like exodus of players because of how we had done. So there was this whole, a lot of guys left that year. So I think starting that third preseason, I was like the second or third longest tenured guy on the roster, and I'd only been there 2 years. So I mean, and I had I was like, all right, I was excited because we had brought in a bunch of talented guys. So I was like completely fine with, I'm totally okay to not start 33 games if our team is better. Like, I want our team to be better. So like, I don't need to play 90 minutes every game. So I went to preseason with new coaching staff, knew everything for a couple weeks. And then we got back, and it was actually like walking into dinner that night after we got off a plane from preseason trip. I was walking to dinner for Valentine's Day with my wife, and I like got a call from my agent. I was like, oh, this is weird. But like, I just ignored it. And then I got a text from him. It was like, you need to call me back ASAP, which was like really weird for like a Friday night or whatever.
Yeah.
So I called him, and then he told me. And then I literally got a call like 1 minute later that I had to go in the next day to meet with our GM. So I was like, all right, well, here it is. And at that point, I don't even think I knew where yet. And then I think I found out like an hour later from my agent where. And then I literally like was there and then left the next day and went back to the exact same place in preseason that I had been with the Fire.
Yeah, and for those that don't know, that where was Montreal.
Montreal. Yeah.
Were you pretty? I know in the letter you penned you were upset, but I mean, how upset were you really?
It was one of those things where like up until then in my life, like all these big things that happened to me, decisions, it was all my choice. Like, it was been my decision to go to Notre Dame. Like, ultimately, it was my decision to sign with the Fire. Like, it was the first thing. You have these like life plans for yourself, and like, I had all my family, my wife, girlfriend at the time was living in Chicago. Like, everyone, like all these people I was close with in my life were in Chicago. And I had this like plan. I was like, oh, it'd be great to stay here my whole career and really like help this franchise turn around, because it had been like 5 years of not the best. So at the time I was like, God, this sucks. Like, I don't want to leave. I don't want to go to this other city. Like, it could have been anywhere. It wasn't even Montreal specific. Like, I just didn't want to go. Looking back on it, like, it was by far the best thing that's ever happened to me from like a personal growth perspective. And I think it would have been hard for me to ever choose. And I might have gotten there one day to like choose to leave Chicago. But now that I have left and like done my own thing and been in both Montreal and Seattle, where like I didn't know it, like I don't have friends from home. I don't have friends from college. Like, no one I know were in those two cities. So I kind of had to like live my own life and actually figure it out on my own. So like having that for 5 years or so was something that's going to be more beneficial to me long-term in my life than staying in Chicago would have been.
Okay. And from a soccer standpoint, did you, it's funny. I looked at that Montreal team, and I remember that team because y'all walloped us in DC in the playoffs at home. But I mean, on paper, I don't know. It's weird. Like, on paper, I feel like I don't know. I would never have thought, oh, that team was pretty stacked. You know what I mean? But in hindsight, like, it was a stacked team. Like, what'd you think going into that team? I mean, obviously you were at a team that was pretty bad, but I don't feel like you at the time you probably didn't think this is a huge upgrade.
No, I didn't really know, honestly. Like, I don't even remember my thoughts of what I thought I was going into. I think I thought like, well, it can't be worse from a team point of view. Like, like if anything, it's going to be better.
Yeah.
Like, as sad as that is to say. But I didn't really know. And I think, I played a good amount when I first went there. And then, my first like 2 months, I played absolutely terribly. And I think for me, it was like the first time in my life that something like wasn't going my way. And like, I had never, ever dealt with not having confidence on the field before. Like, my entire life, it was like, all right, I have this confidence, or all of a sudden it was gone. So I think figuring out how to get that back over the course of the year, because I went through a spell in the middle of the year where I wasn't really playing, which was like also huge for me to like get over that mental hurdle. And then I was playing a little bit, and then we had a bunch of guys, like we kind of changed late in the year. I remember how we started playing, and we basically went to being a straight transition team, which because we had Piatti, we had Oduro, we had all these guys that were like super fast and really good in transition, which like obviously is not my game at all. So like for me, it was like, all right, I'm happy our team's doing well, but like this doesn't really suit my style of play because I'm probably the slowest person on the field no matter where I'm playing. So I think, yeah, it was kind of this weird thing where like I didn't really expect us to make the Eastern Conference Finals. But then like over the course of that last like 5 games of the regular season, we just kind of like figured out how to play at the right time, and then also just got hot at the right time. Yeah, it's kind of funny looking back because I haven't really thought about that in a few years.
Yeah, I mean, for those that don't know, they were in that wild finish with Toronto. It was probably one of the better entertaining matches.
The game, I don't even remember that. The first leg of that at home was when they like mispainted the box.
Yeah, it was weird. Like everything about it was kind of weird. But I mean, I remember just from a DC perspective, like we were playing you guys in the one-off, and I remember like Mancuso was up front, and we got the scouting report like really wrong on that one. Like it was like, oh, they're playing this guy, like he's not very good. And I think we were almost, I mean, you never look ahead. You know how it is. You never look ahead, but we were like looking ahead. And I think he just lit us up, man. And
he was someone that like, I mean, yeah, he was like, I was always conflicted on, but like for those 10 games or whatever, like the end of the regular season, that playoffs, he was like insane.
Lights out.
Like, just lights out. Yeah.
Well, I remember one of our, there was a behind the scenes guy that did all the stuff, and he sent me a text or something about how he's overrated or he wasn't very good. And I occasionally, just when I'm like today, I come across it, I'll send him a text like, hey, you remember that time when you said, and he just doesn't respond. It's just like don't even
that's
bother.
Incredible.
But no, y'all were a good team, and then you're only there for a little bit. I mean, did you want to stay there, or what were you thinking? You talk to me about going to Seattle.
Yeah, it was one of those things that like I remember after the season meeting with their like front office staff, and I just communicated like, hey, it's been awesome. There's some things both like on the personal side it'd be nice because like I got engaged that off season, and like my fiance, like, and now wife wasn't going to be able to work in Montreal without like speaking French, which she didn't. So there was like some personal stuff. And then also like from a team playing point of view, like they kind of communicated they wanted to keep playing the same way because it was going to be a similar roster. So I just didn't necessarily think it was the best fit from like a soccer X's and O's point of view. But I was also open, like if nothing worked out, it's not like I said I was never going to come back there. Like I was just like, hey, if there's something, like I'd be open to being traded again. So there's a few different options. I kind of was like, I wasn't trying to go anywhere in particular. I just said, hey, if there's a team that, to my agent, like if there's a team that you think from a soccer point of view would be a good fit, I'm more than happy to explore that. Seattle was like how it worked out, but I wasn't like trying to get to Seattle or anything.
So you were happy with that move?
I was, and it was very different. And I'd always, like, obviously Seattle was always a team that was on ESPN. So you end up watching a lot of Sounders games. And I thought, wow, it's a cool city from like a soccer perspective. Playing in front of 50,000 fans a game was something that was like, oh, that'd be pretty cool. But like, it was also interesting because they just won. That was the year I was coming in an off season where they just won. So I also realized, hey, there's like a lot of pressure here because they were changing the team quite a bit, but the expectations I'm sure were going to be like, hey, the expectations were going from like nothing in Chicago to all of a sudden a year and a half or a little over a year later, it's like, well, the expectation is to win a championship again.
Yeah.
So you do feel that like kind of pressure coming into a situation where like at the beginning of it, you're sitting through ring ceremonies and like doing all this stuff where like you weren't part of that team, or people are telling you like, oh, great job last year. And I'm like, I wasn't here last year. Like I didn't win. So like that part was weird, but from like a culture and soccer fit point of view, I was really happy with it.
Well, just to make you feel better, I did that at DC and at Houston.
Yeah, so the feeling.
They call me the cooler. I cooled them off, baby.
Yeah.
But, okay, so tell me, Tell me about, I know Schmetzer he took over halfway through the year before you got there, but this is really his first head coaching experience in terms of MLS. The guy's got, tenure way back, but, did you enjoy playing for him? He seems like he had nothing but nice things to say about you recently. He seems like a good guy. I don't know him personally. I mean, tell me about.
Yeah, he's someone that I think what he does well is he knows when to get out of the way and I don't think he tries to micromanage at all, which I think for a team like we've been the last 4 years of having really talented guys, also guys that are willing to work hard. I think he's good at we're never going to be the most X's and O's prepared team ever, but I think guys feel really comfortable when they're in the game that they're in the right position to be successful, and I think he lets guys express themselves on the field and do what they do best. So I think that's something that is probably his biggest strength that I enjoyed, because it kind of gives you the freedom to not ever the way I play outside mid is very different than the way Jordan Morris plays outside mid. So I think understanding that and giving guys a little bit of freedom to figure out within a game how to best impact the game is something that I think, again, is something I enjoyed.
And then you got there kind of at the end of Clint's run. Is that?
Yes. So we overlapped for a year and a half. I think he retired halfway through 2018.
And what do you think of Clint? I mean, I know he's I grew up. Clint and I are the same age, and I love Clint. I think guys are always interested to see what they think of Clint. That's all.
Yeah, I think he was someone that, it was different. He was most of the time I was playing with him, he was kind of battling injuries, and it was obviously the very end of career, so he was dealing with some physical stuff that was tough. And I saw it every day. I think the things that he brought were that even in practice every day, that competitive toughness. That I think I wasn't really used to. And there was a few different guys, you had Ozzy, it was the same way in Seattle. You had a few guys that every day you were going to battle and compete and hate each other for small-sided games and in practice. And then him, he's to this day the best in practice finisher I've ever been around.
Okay. Better than Oduro?
Slightly better than Oduro.
Sorry, Dom. I love you. I played with Dom. I can say
honestly,
that.
Mike McGee is up there too, just in terms of pure practice finishing. Those two guys, just the composure in practice.
What about Piatti?
He was similar, but I would say he's the best one-on-one player I've ever been around.
Okay.
That guy in practice did some crazy things.
Right.
But no, I enjoyed playing with Clint, and I never really played. And I obviously had watched him since I was young, so that part was cool. But yeah, he's a different personality and someone that not everyone gets along with. But I do think he taught me some things about how to approach practice from a competitiveness point of view.
Okay. Well, we talk about your Seattle. You kind of sum it up, but you were able to. You got close to winning it, and then you get there and you win it last year. I don't want to get past that, but I think you had some really big personalities on that team, some staples of MLS. Yeah. I'm talking about Chad Marshall in particular. Yeah. I was a big fan of his over the course of my career. You had Roman Torres I know he's a personality. Yeah. Then you kind of had some under the radar guys, and I don't know Rui Diaz. He seems like a little bit under the radar on some level. Lodero seems quiet. Jordan is quiet. What did you take away? I know you hung out a lot with Will Bruin. Yeah. But tell me about some of the guys on that team that the fans. Those are the ones that everyone wants to know about.
Yeah, we definitely had some big personalities, like you said, like Roman, Chad. I think we had a good mix of that. I don't think you can have a team full of personalities. And I also think we had some guys like Jordan, who is incredibly talented, but also probably the most humble kid you've ever been around. So I think having that good balance was something that led to success. I also think it was that was, and it kind of started maybe the year before, but that team in particular, no matter what the situation of the game was, no one was going to panic. We could have been down 3-0 and still had full 100% confidence that we were going to win the game, which is weird. I've never been on a team.
That's a shot at our DC United
Yeah,
team.
it happened, didn't? Oh, I didn't even realize it was DC.
Well, yeah. I'm sure you didn't realize that.
I actually didn't.
3-0, and you scored 4 goals.
The funny thing about that is I literally started that game, and I think I got subbed out like the 50th minute when we were down 3-0, so I was not a part of that comeback.
Well, I was watching on the bench, so I wasn't happy, but I can't imagine a meltdown. That was the worst case scenario for us.
Yeah, I just think we had a bunch of like calm guys that like when things weren't going well, like they just had this confidence that it was going to work out, which also I think comes from the coaching staff a little bit too. So yeah, like that was, I'd say, the difference in that team from any of the other teams I'd been on in my career.
Okay. Well, so we mentioned you won MLS Cup last year, and you start this season off. Let's talk about it. I mean, it's probably one of the weirder things I've seen in sports. Usually you see it. I've seen it in football with contract stuff, right? It's dramatic. This one it's a crazy year. I mean, we've got a pandemic going on, no sports, no activity. Let's talk about why now. What happened to lead to this?
To like my personal decision?
Yes, yeah. No, not to the pandemic. I don't want to.
Yeah. I was like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be.
I'm just curious as to how it happened with you.
Yeah, it was something. I kind of always knew when I was starting my career a while ago now. Like I just knew, like I said, I want to do something outside of soccer, and I always thought like going get my MBA was like a way to bridge that gap in order to like to surround myself with smart people who came from diverse backgrounds and would allow me a couple years to like figure out exactly what I wanted to do next. So that was kind of always in my plans. I studied like a couple years ago, like maybe 2 years ago or 3 years ago, I studied for and took the GMAT, which is like the test to get in, and I did well. So I was like, all right, I know I can get into a good school with this. And then I never really knew what the timing was going to be, but I remember coming off of last season, this off season, I was thinking about like, there was a lot of days that year, even though we won a championship, where like I wasn't super happy day to day, and I couldn't really figure out why. And after thinking about it for a month or two, I kind of realized like I'd been like my whole life focus had been soccer, and you try to like basically maximize your own potential, get to the best you can possibly be. And I'd felt that tangible growth all through high school, college, my first 5 years in the league. Like I felt like I was growing as a player. And then I just felt like, as every athlete hits at some point in their life, like you kind of hit that peak or plateau of what you're going to be. And I had like these dreams and like goals that I had set when I was little that like I hadn't reached yet. And like realistically, they were too big to ever reach. Like play for the national team, go over to Europe, play in a World Cup. And like, for me, I could set these smaller goals of like, hey, I want to score X amount of goals or make X amount of dollars in the next couple of years. But like for me, those goals that I was thinking about for the next 3 to 5 years, like weren't big enough to make me super passionate about like getting up every day and being like, all right, how do I achieve this? How do I do this? So for me, it was kind of like, I realized I wanted to create a new set of dreams and goals and passions that like, how do I become the best in the world at something else? And like, how do I wake up every day as passionate about this as I have been about soccer, like for most of my life? And it's not like an easy decision. It was something even after I got into schools, I like thought about it for, the one good thing about quarantine was like, I really did have 3 months to think about what I wanted to do and like whether this was actually a step I wanted to take, because it wasn't something that was actually easy to like make that final call on. With that being said, like I am super excited for that next step and to like figure out what's going to be the thing that I can channel this much like passionate energy towards.
Okay. Well, yeah, I think it's funny, right? I see a lot of these guys are working on their golf games, and you've decided to do a whole life change.
And like too, it was something too, like I was never someone who like played video games or anything. And like, so last year I actually ended up working with my free time. I worked up with a bunch of like tech startups in Seattle through an accelerator, like that was co-funded by Amazon. So I spent a lot of my free time, like every day after practice, I would spend like 2 to 8 every day just working with these tech startups. And it was something that I was like, wow, this is so fun. Like, this is cool. And it's something I'd never really had an experience before. So I think that also that experience for 6 months last year, like gave me this confidence that like, I can be happy doing something else. I'm not only going to be happy playing soccer in my life. Cause that was one of those things I didn't want to do it, whether it was now or 5 years from now, where I was going to like regret it. And I think I got to the point where like, now I'm very confident that I won't ever regret the decision, even if I miss soccer, because there are going to be days where I definitely miss going to practice and miss being around the guys and miss games. But I don't think I'll ever regret the decision.
Yeah, and you bring up an interesting point, and there's more and more guys doing what you've done. They don't do it in the middle of the year, although I think Brandon Vincent maybe did. I don't remember if it was in the middle of the year, but he left. I played with a former teammate of yours, Luke Michu.
Yeah.
And Luke was promising, started playing more, and second year he decides this isn't something I'm going to do. And I was baffled, and I said, why don't you want to do this, Luke? And he said, look at you. He said, you're going on like 13 years in the league, and you're going to have to start all over in business or whatever. And I think I'm not saying I can't have a successful career, but I'm not sure I'll accomplish what you've accomplished, and it's not going to get me any closer to what I should be doing next level. And he retired. And that was kind of eye-opening for me that guys were looking at that way. Is that, would you say that's kind of accurate? If guys have other opportunities and they are losing a little bit of that desire, that you think that'll be more of a normal thing going forward?
Yeah, it's hard. Like, I don't know. And I try to tell people, like, I don't think my decision is the right decision for everyone. Like, I think everyone is in their own individual situations. And I think it's a lot of like being honest with yourself. One, like, is this something I really want to do long term? And two, like, for me, like, I think for Luke, like, he's one of my best friends. I think if he had played another few years, I think he could have still kept getting better. He was young enough where, like, I don't think he had plateaued as a player. Like, I think for me, it was like, I think for me, it was literally like, I'm almost 30 years old. Like, I have these physical limitations, and I felt like I had maximized every ounce of talent, natural talent that I had. And it's also hard, like, until you get to the point where guys are making NBA, NFL money, like, I could have made really good money for the next few years, but it wasn't going to be something that I could retire off of. So, like, at some point I was going to have to do something else. So no, I do think for certain guys, if they have the ability, like, it's great. But I do think it's like up to each individual person to really think long and hard about it.
Okay. Well, I think we talk about you are more cerebral than most of the guys I think that played in this league. So it seemed, I don't doubt for a minute that you've overthought this and you're happy with.
If anything, I've thought about it too much.
No, I think it's a big decision, and I do believe, I talk to a lot of guys that have retired. I do believe that guys that retire on their own terms are much happier than guys that don't. Usually it's a guy not getting a contract, and they're getting forced to either go play somewhere they don't want to play, or a lot of guys have big families, and they're telling them, hey, you got to go play in the USL. Nothing's guaranteed, or there's always some stipulation that usually ends up, that either the guy plays and he's unhappy, or he's unhappy that he didn't get the last contract. So I think in your case, if you make this decision, it's you have a lot more confidence because it was your choice, not the other way around.
Yeah, and I think there is a situation too where, like, if the virus didn't happen, like, I could have, I had a really good first 6 months of the year. Like, there is a situation where I didn't choose this year and I like kicked it down the road a few years. I just think with all of what's happened, and I'm out of contract at the end of this year, and I just really think I don't think it was going to be a good off season to be out of contract. And I just think, like, all of those things kind of factored into, like, me. It was all screaming the same thing, where, like, this is the right year to do it.
Okay. Well, we talk about MLSPA stuff. You were, I think since your first year, you were working with the PA, and I think it was an interesting off-season one to be a PA guy, and then obviously with getting ready for this MLS's back tournament. What can you tell me? Did that have any influence? Any of that? I know that some players they're being very, very vocal about their distaste for what's happening. What are your thoughts on it, if you feel comfortable sharing them?
Yeah, it sucks because this last negotiation, because I was around in the 2015 one, and I think it was just at the beginning of my career. So a lot of it was me just like leaning on experiences from other older players. I didn't really have a lot of those personal experiences myself. And I think there was like a sour taste in a lot of guys' mouth with how those ended. And I think doing this 2020 negotiation and me having like a much bigger role, both within the PA and like with my club team, I was happy with how it turned out. And I think it was partly because the process was like 18 months long. So I think both sides really understood what the other side wanted, and we're figuring out how can we make it work from both sides. And the unfortunate thing is, like, obviously right after that, you're in this global situation where like no good is going to come from it. And, both sides, when you're talking about both reopening the CBA, like a pay reduction, and trying to figure out a non-ideal return to play, like no one was going to be happy, both from the ownership side and the player side. So you're kind of going into it just saying, look, wow, this is going to be like not ideal results. And I think it was hard. Like there was no way around it. I think there was, a lot of players felt disrespected by, both some of the content of what the league had put out, especially early on, and then also some of the process stuff of how the league handled things. And I do not, like, I'm not going to be ever like the most vocal guy in the media of, saying this or that. But I do think, I think guys who did do that had every right to be upset with, how the league handled some things. And, I think ultimately, like, we got to a situation where it was a deal that guys could live with. You're not going to be thrilled about it because you are taking some, potential or some cut now and potential economic cut in the future, but also like it wasn't going to change their lives. And I think that was kind of where we were trying to get to. And the tournament, again, it was like, I mean, that's honestly why I retired now. Like I was going to do it anyway, but I just thought, wow, it's like, I don't want to go to Orlando for a month or 6 weeks or whatever. And then, no, I'm going to retire right after that. Like I'd rather come home and spend time with family.
Yeah.
And I do think there was a lot of guys on our team specifically who, like, at first had some medical concerns. And I think those kind of were a little bit more answered as we went on and saw like the medical protocols from both our doctors and their doctors, but also like family concerns for international guys who had families in Seattle that like, they were like, I can't be away for that long and all this stuff. So I think trying to balance those things and not every player being in the same situation. Like there were some guys that were super pumped about going to Orlando. Like, yeah, this is great. I get to not pay for any meals for a month or 6 weeks. Like I get to live for free by the pool. And then having some guys that are like very, very opposed to it was hard to balance.
Yeah. I mean, I and that's why I say you see some of the guys are voicing their opinions. I think some guys are mad that they're happy they're going down there and back to playing, but they're mad they won't be able to live a social life.
I just don't, like, I don't understand, like in a perfect world, obviously, like no one wants to go do this, right? Like this, like no one wants to go live in a hotel for 6 weeks or whatever. But I think given where we're at in the world and like our obligation to at least try to make it work to get back to playing games, like that's why I was, at least like for me personally, I was like, we can't just shut them down and not engage in some sort of process, because like it is our obligation to at least try to make it work to have us play. If it didn't end up working out because of medical or whatever, like that's fine. But I do think we had to at least explore the option of getting back on the field at some point in 2020.
Yeah, no, I mean, just I'm a fan now, right?
Yeah.
I want to see the games, but I also am. You're seeing now I don't want to get into the how it's starting to act up again, and I think there's some real concerns with even Florida in general. Like, and
I think like dealing with the employees on the resort, and like there's like a million issues that you're trying to deal with, and I still get texts like every day from guys that are like, concerned about the Florida thing. And I'm like, I'm not even on the team anymore. Like, direct your concerns to someone else.
Oh, well, get used to that. I still get them occasionally. Hey, do you remember how we dealt with this or that? Or
I know I'm still going to get workers comp questions in about 5 years.
Oh yeah, you'll get them. Don't worry. Well, speaking of that, we'll look forward. We didn't talk about this. You're going to get your MBA at Northwestern Business School, very highly prestigious school. What can we expect? I think, you kind of say you're a soft-spoken guy, but you've kind of found your voice, it seems, a little bit recently on social media with some of the Black Lives Matter and some of the other issues with this country. Are we going to see more of that from you going forward for the people that are fans of yours that want to continue to follow you?
Yeah, I think it'll be different, right? Because like I'm going to have a different platform going forward. I think like whenever you go from playing to not playing, like, and that was part of the reason why I felt obligated to like say something, is that like this was the last, I knew at that point, like this was probably the last chance I'm going to have like this platform. So I like everything I try to do in my life, I try to be super thoughtful, and like, I'm never going to be the first to speak, but I want to like accumulate as much information as possible and then give a rational opinion on things. And I think that is something like the Black Lives Matter stuff in general is something I'm really passionate about, because I've been, like I said in the thing, like I've experienced privilege to the nth degree my entire life. Like I grew up in a place that was predominantly white. I went to school at a place that was predominantly white. Like soccer was always my way out of that. But without soccer, like I probably would have ended up in an industry that was predominantly white. So like I have this, I've had these experiences with people that haven't been in the same bubble that I have through soccer, both pre-professionally and professionally. So it's just something that I've always deeply cared about, and trying to bring that back to, like, you know, if I go to business school or end up in a business, like trying to bring some of those things that are important to me back to them. And when I'm in a position of power someday, like actually making real tangible difference is something that is 100% going to be, you know, top of my mind.
All right. Well, I think that's awesome, man. I think, you know, there aren't a lot of guys that are taking a stand on that. And, you know, I think it's noteworthy. And, you know, I always say, regardless of whether people agree with you or don't, and I call this my Jeff Cameron defense. You know, I don't necessarily agree with what a lot of people say or what everyone says, but I do think it's important that guys have a forum where they can say their opinion and not get ostracized for it. And, you know, I think in your case, you're very eloquent in how you say it. So, you know, I think it's good, man. And I wish more guys would do it. But I hope going forward that we do see more from Harry Shipp, as opposed to, you know, I say when I retired, right, there were people that hated me when I played, usually Chicago or New England or New York Red Bull fans or Dallas fans.
Right, a lot of my own fans hated me, so it's good.
Well, no, but I think now, you know, it is you're an alum, you know, a really fresh off the out of the gate alum, but you know, and I think a lot of people they care about your opinion because you've seen it and you've experienced it. So I hope that going forward, you know, you feel like I think people will be more in tune with what you're saying from all teams. You know, maybe not Portland, because I don't think they'll ever get.
I can say it now. I have nothing against Portland, so.
Yeah. Okay. Well, they have something against you just because you played for Seattle. But no, I appreciate you taking the time today. I wish you nothing but luck going forward, man. I think I'm excited for you. I think you have a great opportunity, and you know, anytime someone kind of does something we're not used to seeing, it catches our attention. And, you know, I appreciate you making time today. I know that there aren't a whole lot of places where you've been kind of stayed away from being in front of the camera. So I appreciate you taking the time and being in front of it today with us.
Yeah, no, this was easy. I enjoyed it.
All right, man. Well, thanks again. And that's Harry Shipp, everybody.